Okay, here we go. We can let everybody in now. This is always one of my favorite parts. So watching everybody join us. So welcome. We see Claire and Denise and Cheryl, and all the names go zipping too quickly at that point, and I can't read everybody's name, but I want to welcome everybody here to today's Variety webinar. Little different spin here today. You might notice we have our NDLW backgrounds up because our speaker today we were originally hoping to have her here for National Distance Learning Week. You'll hear more about that in just a moment. But first, I do need to share a couple of little commercial breaks because I got to keep the lights on and the webinars playing and all that, all that sorts of stuff. So as I said, you're here for the Friday webinar. Hopefully that's where you intended to be. If not, then stay here anyway, because we're gonna have a lot of great information and a lot of interesting stuff going on. And look at this, we have more people knocking at the door. We're gonna let them in before we proceed. There we go. All right, don't want to leave anybody out in the hallway. All right, so I do want to remind people that if you haven't already marked your calendar, please mark your calendar for the USDLA National Conference, which this year will be in sunny Orlando. And for some of you this time of year, sunny anywhere sounds really good. I know that, depending on if you're in those snowy, cold places, and I see some head nods. Yep, I know. I snuck out recently. But please save the date. It's the week of July 17th through 20th, and there'll be a whole lot more information coming out. We already have some of our keynotes listed on the website. Please go check that out. And also, this is a community and we all learn from each other. And so please, if you have something you want to share with the community, the call for proposals and the call for awards are both open right now. So please go to the website. I'll also drop some links in the chat later in the session to get you there. But please go ahead and fill out those proposals. We have all sorts of different types of sessions this year. We're trying a few new things. And if you want to know more about that, you can speak to me or anybody at USDLA, and we would love to have you there. My other little commercial break is the real commercial break, because I have to say thanks to our sponsors. Without them, this would be a lot harder to do. So if you see somebody you work with on this screen, these are our gold and silver sponsors, please reach out to your rep, say hello, see what they have planned in the pipeline for 2023, or make your request. Tell them what you'd like to see on the pipeline, and you never know, if you don't ask, it ain't gonna happen. And then also here are our bronze sponsors and our friends and partners. And again, if you see names on there you're not familiar with, please go check them out. I've met so many new people that we're doing things in distance and digital learning that I knew nothing about. And that's how we find out things. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my slides, and I am going to briefly pass this over to Gio Laws, who is the chair of National Distance Learning Week, so she can say a few words and do the introduction to today's speaker, Lisa Clark. So thank you all again for being here.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And again, warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us and joining this conversation. We're very excited to have you, and I am thrilled to have Dr. Lisa Clark join us. This conversation, as Valerie mentioned, was originally part of National Distance Learning Week 2022. I just placed a link in chat. So the recording and slides will be available after the presentation on this NDLW 2022 site. So please visit that site again. And as a reminder, the theme of National Distance Learning Week for our 15th anniversary edition was leadership across all aspects of distance learning. And we've heard from some phenomenal speakers, and right now we are about to hear from another phenomenal speaker, Dr. Lisa Clark, who will talk to us about leadership decisions in faculty training for online teaching and learning. I've known Dr. Clark for quite a few years. She's just the most delightful person and consummate professional. I'm just so thrilled that she was willing to set aside some time for us today. So, Lisa, would you be so kind to introduce yourself and then lead us into your presentation? Thank you so much.
I will. Thank you so much, Gio. That was very kind of you. So hi, everybody. I'm not going to bore you too much with a long interview of myself here, but I'm really thrilled to be here. And I do apologize for not being able to be actively participating during the National Distance Learning Week. I ended up getting laryngitis I was actually in Bogota, Colombia with a big group of our team that I work with, and I couldn't talk. I was in a coughing fits and everything else, so you wouldn't have wanted to try to hear me. So I do appreciate USDLA and Dr. Laws, and of course, Valerie as well, to allow me to do this over again, if you will. So thank you all for your patience with me there. So as Gio said, I am Lisa Clark. I actually am a senior product manager for a company called Anthology. And if that is not familiar to you, perhaps you know the product I work on, which is Blackboard Learn, specifically Learn Ultra, which is our new learning management system. However, prior to that, I actually was I've been with Anthology for 8 years. So I was a client experience manager with them prior to being on the product side, and worked with a number of institutions. I worked with, I think, I literally counted yesterday, I think like 23, 24 different countries across the world, in different institutions, those countries. So I've been very blessed to be able to, as a faculty member also. So I was a full-time faculty member and program director for visual communication technology for about 12 years prior to all of this. And I've held a number of other roles there, as you can see on the screen as well. So going way back, I was a tech geek. So I started off as a programmer, and I've worked my way through the design parts and the creative parts of computers into distance learning. And all of my graduate work has been in distance learning as well. So super happy to be here with you today, and I appreciate your time. So part of what we're going to talk about today is going to start off with this idea of what has happened since the pandemic. And as you all know, the main years of the global pandemic, so we'll say that we'll go 2020 to 2022, that brought about some immense amount of change to the higher education environment worldwide. Institutions either canceled courses or they hurriedly restructured their courses to be taught fully online. And to begin our conversation today, I'm actually going to be utilizing some of the research that began at the height of this pandemic in the spring of 2020, and it was actually for my dissertation. So I'm going to take that information that I had, and that was a very specific set of criteria that I was looking for there. So it was all research done for adjunct faculty professional development for online teaching and learning at community colleges. So it was a different set of sample that you would have been looking at, but I have kind of compiled that data along with some of the a little bit more informal data that I've utilized since then for other presentations that I have conducted. And with those were started around the end of 2021. I included some data from informal conversations and surveys that I've had with full-time instructors, with administrators, and more importantly, I think, with students. This informal research used quantitative and qualitative ways of getting information, a lot of qualitative feedback, which has been just invaluable. And I utilized a survey as well to collect research, not only in the preliminary stuff with my dissertation, but also moving forward, I used a survey with the students as well to gain some feedback from them also. I also held interviews with students fall 2020, and then again this last fall, 2022, to gather some more information there as well. So that continuation of student conversations that happened in fall of 2022, those were students who once again had been really involved in teaching and learning and were actual students during those years of the pandemic. And I asked them to provide feedback to different questions about their experiences, what they saw happen, what they now have gained as information is what they're needing now in their teaching and learning experience, or their learning experience, if you will, there. They had the opportunity to provide a narrative of any other kind of feedback that they wish to share with me regarding those experiences while they were attending classes during the height of the pandemic. And those details were collected also with full-time faculty and administrators at well over 100 webinars and in-person faculty workshops that I've conducted since the pandemic started. For those of you who do know me or were a part of the Blackboard Learn experience by then, you would know that those webinars were happening just all the time. So a combination of those, the student surveys, the student feedback sessions, my own research. And then I also just participated in October at EDUCAUSE and had a poster session there that I offered 2 different times, and had a lot of walk-through traffic there and was able to gather even more information with that as well. So really exciting stuff there. This feedback, again, I'm excited because I feel like, you know, a culmination of it really does provide a real world experience, real world practices, and perspectives of not only the instructor, but also the student, and gives them a voice, you know, about their learning experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic, what has transpired since then, where are we looking at for distance learning practices, both current and future, and the need to feel a sense of belonging to students as well. So these discussions, that current research put together some thought leadership and planning on how to move beyond those pandemic years. You know, we're still adjusting, we're still making adjustments as to how we're going to handle these kinds of things. And we really want to look to at how we can best keep our students engaged, right? We want to keep them involved. We want to keep them involved in their learning experiences and give them some ownership there. So we're going to look at that as well. And I do hope that you feel the same as I do after hearing the perspectives and the voice of the post-pandemic student. It really was insightful. It provided a lot of guidance for me as, you know, potentially another adjunct faculty member coming into play later on in my career. I've served as adjunct as well throughout my professional career since I taught full time. Not that this is a focus on adjunct faculty, but it does give you a different perspective because of that balance of full-time somewhere else and then teaching part-time. And then for full-time faculty, I think it gives a sense of awareness as to what their students had gone through during the pandemic and giving them a voice as to what they want to share with us moving forward. So let's go ahead and move on through here. And let's talk about that. So though the challenges in online instruction,
I'm sorry to
they were
interrupt,
always
Lisa.
present.
I'm sorry to interrupt you for a second. We have sort of an unusual technical problem going on here in the background. And I'm going to have to put a new Zoom link into the chat for everyone. I apologize, this is very unusual, but I want to make sure that we capture all of Dr. Clark's wisdom. And so I am going to, in just a moment, I'm going to drop a different Zoom link into the chat and give you all a moment to copy it. And then please come join us. Give us a moment. We'll all exit this meeting and we will all reconvene in the other location. And again, I so apologize for this, but I wanted to, it looked like a good place to kind of pause you and have this little sort of transference from one place to another. So here, I'm putting the link. Let me get that in there. Looks like it copied it twice. Let me do this cleanly. Apologize. I'm trying to run many fingers back here to make this happen. All right, here we go. Go over here to our chat. All right, so this will be the updated Zoom link. So please take a moment, copy that link out of chat to your clipboard. And once you have copied it, you can exit this meeting. And then as soon as I see the sort of traffic is cleared from this meeting, I will go and open that other Zoom link for us. I apologize again for the inconvenience.
I can't. It said it's disabled.
Okay, of course it is, because this is live television and we're going to make sure it's going to be one more thing. Okay, 1 second. Let's make sure. Here we go. Now you should be all good to go. This is why we do what we do, right? So that we can solve technical problems for people and we can make it happen. And no matter where we are and what happens, we make it happen. So there we go. All right. So make sure you can get shared okay, and then I will make myself scarce again. There we go. I see you. Everything looks great. You sound great. Again, apology for the interruption, but we are still recording this, and we'll make sure that the recordings get all kissed back together and fixed.
We're good. We're good. So thank you everybody for coming back into the pool here and seeing this through with us. I appreciate that. So where we were. So let's talk about those challenges. So the challenges with online instruction, we've always known it's been there. For any of you who have been a part of distance education for as many years as maybe I have, well over 20 at this point in my life, the struggles of what we then saw in early 2020 with the emergency remote teaching were a legitimate concern for all the world's faculty, right? As a professional dealing in this area, at that exact time, I witnessed firsthand involvement with institutions literally all over the world. There was a lack of training, a lack of preparation for asynchronous teaching foundations, for full-time faculty, for adjunct faculty, you name it. And honestly, not that we train our students to always learn online, because I think we make an assumption that they're, digital natives are going to be able to do this just fine. There was a really lack of involvement there as well. So that was all very evident. I went through and literally spoke to over 19,000 global participants at one time with over 80 remote sessions for webinars. So, the feedback that we got was just this constant feedback. And it was wonderful to know that in ways we were helping to try to get through this together. So there were, a number of things that were poised to us: a lack of standards for online learning, no time to prepare for formalized learning, which by way of the pandemic. And what can we do, really to think about what that impact meant and how we can move forward and to prepare better for any kind of situation that could happen, from that point forward. I used to have a webinar called No More Snow Days, for instance, because I live in an area in the snow belt where that was a problem because people were missing out on a lot of school days because of snow. So to prepare for that versus to prepare for a pandemic, really different, but somewhat related, right? So now 3 years into this new construct that we have for higher education, there are ways that we can ensure to make the necessary adjustments to online programming that can meet the needs of all students, and really make sure that they're on the right path to success. In addition, evidence-based models of hybrid and fully online learning have emerged that also help support these new directives and expectations from university administration, from faculty and instructors, and to an extent also the students. So due to the uncertain path of what this new normal may take, institutions, I believe, need to be proactive in preparation and planning for online learning, online teaching, and making it a top priority moving forward. And I believe many are doing that. So with the continued investigation with students that I did with those informal surveys, who again, they were attending classes from early 2020 through fall 2022, and most are continuing with that qualitative feedback. I had the opportunity to get those narratives and to take a look at what it is that they really felt they needed when it came to their online learning. They needed to feel this sense of belonging. That was a major thing that happened during the whole thing. And there's really kind of a post-traumatic stress syndrome that's going on about what happened during the pandemic as well, which was not something I guess I expected to happen. And the more and more I talk to students, and the more, I have 2 college-age students myself. So, talking to their friends, talking to their colleagues and their classmates, it's really interesting to see how we can move beyond those pandemic years, how to get them engaged, personally, interactively in the online classroom as well. So with that, we continued that investigation. We're looking at some things that we can do. And those urgent times that we had called for urgent requirements for instructors to change the methods of the course delivery. We were looking at instructors who were under a great deal of pressure, had very little time to prepare, and some actually had never even turned on or opened a learning management system. So perhaps more stressful was even the adjunct faculty who really didn't have time to prepare for that kind of thing. So that was also a little bit of a stress indicator as well. And we went from that slide you just saw of students going from, interacting and changing and being a part of everything to these slides, right? Empty classrooms, constant sanitation, people that couldn't be near each other. And what did we do, right? I mean, it was literally like a flip of a switch. When that happened, I was honestly presenting as part of a group at gosh, it was in Virginia, I think, but it was a regional event for different colleges and universities. And we got a message from our corporate office that was like, you guys have to go home. You can't be there. There's things are shutting down left and right. We were told grocery stores were shutting down. It was true panic, right? And to do that and be in the middle of where a lot of you were in your offices as an administrator, dealing with distance education and dealing with just in-person education at the same time, and having to make that flip of taking all of that work that was in person to fully online had to have just been a complete stressor. I know it was for many, many people. So with that, with understanding the LMS, with thinking about what can we do with the LMS, learning management system, no matter which one it is that you're using, what can we do to utilize instructional technology to better employ things that we are going to be doing moving forward. With time being of the essence, there was little time at that time to prepare. So what can we do now to prepare for something that might happen in the future? So during the pandemic, when this became a primary platform for course delivery with the LMS, transforming the classroom into an asynchronous platform for learning, through additional training, we have to get there, right? So we could take instructors and hope to mirror the activities that they are doing in the in-person classroom that are naturally found in that face-to-face classroom, and really create an environment that encourages student engagement and collaboration. So one thing that I did find through the research is that, many instructors, even if they hadn't ever even opened or logged in to the learning management system, they did use instructional technology tools in everyday practice. They utilized email. They knew how to create a Word document. They could publish out to a portable document format or PDF. They knew how to do those kinds of things. So some of the benefits of utilizing the learning management system that some people did was to use it as a supplemental guide for their in-person instruction. So they were able to take the things that they did know and put them into their LMS if they did have access to that and they were comfortable in it and they felt that need to fill that need. So the cool thing as we fast forward to now is that we have a lot of instructional technology that is very easy to use. It seems to make sense. The more we are forced into this fully online environment, whether you are a full-time employee somewhere else, full-time employee of a university, full-time instructor, full or part-time instructor, we were challenged to always use our computers. It was either our computer or it was our mobile device or whatever you had at hand. You were utilizing everything you could to communicate. And because of that, it has seemed to be through my conversations with people to be that this is a more common practice. This is something that people are now a little more comfortable with. They're not as scared of technology because they had to utilize it. In many cases, it was their lifeline to get to their families, to get to their friends, to get to their students, to get to colleagues. So because of that, we were able to create a lot of engagement. And so in my studies and in my practice and in my conversations, it seems to me that we maybe can take a twist and a turn as to how we look at professional development as we grow distance education options and increase those opportunities for online teaching. So with those different kinds of tools that are available to create engaging online classrooms, these tools need to be vetted, obviously. We have to look at different tools. What kind of solid training could we give for those kinds of things? And to make sure disruptive technology as well, right? We don't want to use technology just because it's there. We want it to be useful and not disruptive to the process of learning and the process of teaching itself. So some of those benefits are really helpful. But with the pandemic and that dramatic change into online learning itself, we also had some financial struggles as well, which I know. So a lot of people were found scarce with student populations. We had students that were dropping out. We have to look at how we can retain our students, look at things that as we're coming back and as we came back into face-to-face instruction, what can we do to capitalize on the momentum that we had with instructional technology and how can we keep that going as well? And we're trying to figure all this out still. I know that, it's still a new normal, so to speak. So that increased need for professional development, how do we prepare for the future? And how can we look at the different kinds of tools that will make a good benefit? So in 2021, the United States Department of Education conducted a survey. This was actually in August. I looked at it in 2021, but in August of 2020, they were looking at students who were scheduled to take post-secondary classes in the fall. Of those surveys, 45% reported a change from in-person to fully online course delivery, while 31% reported class cancellations and 12% indicated taking fewer classes in the fall of 2020 than they had originally planned. And of course, we know that a lot of that is because of what happened during the pandemic. However, the data from those pursuing associate degrees highlighted slightly different data points. So for those of you of interest there, as you can see here in some ways, I know this is maybe a little bit small on your screen, but I thought you'd be able to see it okay. If you look at those different color bars that are located there, you'll see that as diagrammed here, the students indicated 43% report change from in-person to fully online course delivery at the associate degree level, while 34% reported class cancellations and 13% indicated that they would be taking fewer classes in fall of 2020 than originally planned. So again, we saw a little bit of fluctuation there and a lot of things happening. Participants also, with my research, they were asked, this is the adjunct faculty side, they were asked about the learning management tool usage when they were teaching online. And considering instruction was fully online, really, throughout all of fall of 2020 and most of spring 2021, there were some surprising results here shown to how many tools either were not used by choice or the participants just still didn't know how to utilize those tools. And so as much as they were becoming more familiar and becoming more, I guess, organic to their way of teaching, there were still some struggles there. For example, almost 12% of these participants reported that they didn't know how to create text-based documents online. Some of the same percentage chose not to use instructor-facilitated discussion boards. So that would take away from some of the engagement of an online course. Some of the other struggles, or actually not struggles, the higher usage areas were oddly assessments. You know, one of the, I think, a little bit more complicated areas of utilizing a learning management system are assessments, but it's also great value because it can save so much time for an instructor and it can do auto grading and that kind of thing. And there was a good amount of usage of those being happening here, as well as online grading. Fantastic, because it allows for students to be able to see what they're doing, see their progress, get their feedback right away. So all of that was really important to see as well. So taking all of the things that we're learning and moving forward and thinking about different ways that we can offer professional development moving forward for our institutions is to think really, I'm always student first. So with instructional technology and eliminating barriers, what can we do to provide professional development where instructors are going to be happy to be there, they're going to be encouraged to be there? What can we do to focus on the student? And to think about that as well. So there was a number of things that I looked at here as well. So in regard to the most feasible way of having my adjunct faculty looking at new skills for online teaching, a lot of them were preferring to do video professional development. So online training videos or self-paced instructional materials that were offered online. Both of those were about 64% overall. So those options were very well received, as you can see here on the screen. And a lot of the adjunct faculty were really preferring weekdays or weekend evenings if it was in person, but mostly online instruction for any kind of development that they would have. And that makes a lot of sense because many adjunct faculty are going to have full-time jobs elsewhere and they're not available, you know, any other time but those days really. And online, of course, is an option that is very flexible. For full-time faculty, all the conversations I have had, most of the people tend to ask for those kinds of trainings if they are in person to happen during the workday. They don't want to take up their weekend days. They don't want to take up their weekday evenings if they can avoid it, unless they teach an evening class. And they don't want to they don't want to have to do that, right? So, and that makes sense too. So they also prefer the online option as well. And doesn't it make sense, obviously, to have online training for online teaching online, right? So you can feel that sense of community that has to happen and how you can be engaged in the content and with other people while you're going through and doing that professional development. So all of this was kind of coming full circle here. And from a professional point of view, this particular data was actually pretty interesting to me. So the results here were regarding motivation and incentives for adjunct faculty, highlighting how they could be motivated to do any kind of professional development. And I took these questions and these kinds of examples, and I've spoke to full-time faculty as well, outside of this particular research, to get those responses back also. And it was really interesting. So the results here regarding motivation and incentives were highlighting that helping students was the key motivator to the majority of these respondents, whilst professional growth was also a key motivator. So typically, you know, they have an additional workplace responsibilities for adjunct faculty outside of the institution. And it was not a surprise that time was also a particular barrier, because they, you know, their time is also limited. Secondary to time, when the faculty training was not perceived as relevant or interesting to the adjunct faculty position, this was also identified as a barrier. So let's think about doing professional development that really matters and really puts an emphasis on exactly what needs to be done in the distance learning classroom. Prior to this, I actually would have assumed that monetary incentives would have ranked highest. I know as an administrator myself, when I was a senior director of instructional technology, and I was asking, you know, instructors wanted to do more work online. They wanted supplemental contracts. They wanted to be, you know, compensated for the additional work. And we all know it takes a great amount of work to provide any kind of really good online course. They wanted to be paid for it, right? So I just assumed everybody would feel that way. And oddly, this was not ranked as high as I thought when it came to this particular research that I did. So maybe that's because a lot of adjuncts don't really utilize their adjunct faculty pay as a real moneymaker. I know I don't. I do it because I miss teaching and I want to teach some more and I want the experience. So maybe that's why. Maybe it's because they are provided with a course that's already built out for them a lot of the times, and they don't have to take as much time to dedicate to the course building itself. So maybe that's the reason why. I didn't investigate that any further, so that would be cool further research. And in speaking with full-time faculty, time was a huge distractor, right? Regarding professional growth of any kind. So the fact that they just don't have time during their scheduled work week to fit this in. So the option for online learning was a big sell. Monetary benefits were a little more common that I looked at with those conversations with full-time faculty, because they really did want to know, how can I be compensated for this? I'm already spending so much time building out my content for my face-to-face class. How can I take that and utilize it for anything that I'm going to be doing online, and how can I get paid for it? So again, don't blame them. It's certainly something that came across there. I love the idea that the student was number one in many of the conversations that I had. They want to make sure that that student experience is really key and certainly of importance. So how can we take all of that information, all of those different pieces of feedback, and put them into focus areas for faculty training moving forward? If we are to consider and think about the idea that much of our instructional technology are things that people are more used to now, that they have a greater appreciation for, that they may not need as much technical training as they did previous to the pandemic because they were forced into utilizing this. Where else can we focus some professional development training to enhance the online teaching experience and the online learning experience? So part of that is going to be in engagement. So keeping in mind that those years of isolation, a huge theme coming across from the students that I spoke to and interviewed, and had what's the word I'm looking for? Anonymous feedback. Thank you. I'm talking to myself. The anonymous feedback that we had from our students that came in on the surveys is that they felt alone. They didn't feel like they had anybody to talk to. They were looking at a computer screen all the time. And I'm wagering to bet that many of you probably felt that exact same way, because we were all forced into a remote working environment as well. Now, for me and for others like me who do work out of their home office every day, it wasn't as much of an impact because we were already used to it. But I will tell you that, traveling out to see people which is something that I love doing as part of my job, is something that was cut off. So we weren't able to go anywhere. We weren't able to see anybody. So it was really just a very isolated kind of period, right? And for students in particular, that has carried on to, again, some sort of post-trauma. I'm not a psychologist, but my daughter is a psychology major, and she's told me this too. And it's like they almost want to still be hermits. They're so used to those couple of years forcing them inside all the time that there's one of two ways they have gone with this. One is that they are not wanting to leave their home, and they're feeling still isolated and that they're scared to leave. The other is that they're dying to be around people at the same time. So they have kind of this conflicting motion there. So I think keeping in mind how our students are going to react to learning moving forward, at least till we get through and get back to some sort of normalcy where it comes to social engagement, I think that's really important to see. So with that, utilizing the learning management system to encourage that kind of engagement, I think is going to be incredibly important as we move forward into the future trends here. Certainly, this is a bit of an exaggeration because gone are really the days of just throwing a PowerPoint up on a screen and letting it go, right? I know when I started off in distance education, that was much of the way people did things. And we can't really do that anymore. So even if you could use your PowerPoint and audio record yourself speaking to that PowerPoint, giving the students a voice to be heard, with a transcript, of course, for accessibility reasons as well. But with that, it just gives some sort of personalization to that learning. And this is not rocket science. This is not something new. I know we've always encouraged this with proper engagement when it comes to, distance learning and online learning. But let's think about this more in focusing on this for professional development, right? Over 20 years I spent in higher education, as we say, and honestly, it was the first time ever in my entire career that I literally heard students say they wanted group projects. I've never heard that before. My students always hated group projects. And I had many different responses that came back with, we need more group projects. We want more group projects. We want to interact and be engaged together. So how about doing more professional development that's geared towards that online engagement, to creating that sense of engagement with our students, and to put in those kinds of things that challenge them a little bit, give them remote activities where they can take their phones, they can go out and they can record something that's happening, bring it back to the classroom in a video and share it off with the rest of their teammates or with the rest of the class in general. Let them do audio recordings or video recordings to respond back to different discussion board posts or something like that. So any way that they can utilize their cameras, you utilize your cameras, or have your instructors utilize their cameras, and to think about how just hearing somebody's voice is also something to do. I was adjunct teaching during this time as well, and I even taped myself. I'm dating myself because you don't tape yourself anymore, you record yourself. But I would record myself going through my syllabus, because that's what I would do on my first day of class, is I would talk about the syllabus in person. So I did that on my recording, and students really did appreciate that. So just little things like that that can really help think about, let's try to make this as interpersonal as we possibly can. Another area to look at, and this is something that could be very degree specific or very discipline specific, but another loss from the pandemic that resonated from students was that many of them, and especially in their last couple of years, missed out on internships. They missed out on cooperative education experiences. They missed out on assistantships if they were in grad school. Which greatly impacted their collegiate learning experience that they really signed up for. Some of the reasons they went to the college they went to was because they knew they were going to get these really great experiences. So many of the students that we interviewed, they were juniors, they were seniors when the pandemic hit. They literally graduated without any of those key opportunities. And it was, just really a sad environment altogether. So with that, let's think about professional development in ways that can encourage students to have a lot of hands-on learning in the field kind of learning experiences, working with businesses in higher education as well, that really do focus on remote work, but also in-person work at the same time. So it's not kind of that hybrid working experience there. So the ability to, take away that isolation from the pandemic and give them opportunities moving towards the future so that we are prepared, God willing, this doesn't ever happen again, but should it, we're prepared for that to happen. The other part of this is to also encourage students and to train our instructors to utilize the learning management system, to utilize their laptop, their computer system to work remotely. So how can we fit that into our training and development there as well? Because students are going to be tasked with this with this also. They're not necessarily going to walk out of college and their first job may not be in person. It might be online. So how can they, learn to adapt to that as well? So let's think about different ways we can really encourage that sort of formal interaction with our professional development with our own instructors. And then kind of all tied together there as well as the ability to, really think about that sense of community. So a little different than the engagement part, because with engagement, we're not only talking about engagement with students to students or students to instructors, but there's also that engagement of the student with the content. So we really want to do that. This providing a sense of community is really more about putting these degree programs into use with different kinds of internships, different kinds of things that we can do for hybrid learning and that kind of thing. Whoops, I think I missed a slide. I think I forgot to change this up, so I apologize. It's not loading the right slide, but with the sense of community, that loss was real. That student engagement loss was certainly real, and it's been a continuing saga in their academic lives for a lot of the students that we spoke to. So these students, they want instructors and administration to know that even though they are digital natives and they spend a good amount of time on their electronics, they still want opportunities to interact. They want to be part of something outside of their dorm or their apartment, and they really want to feel like they have somewhere to go, even if it's virtually. So the ability to have person office hours, to have those kinds of things that happen, they really don't want to feel robbed anymore of experiences for their learning. And they kind of crave that whole interpersonal communication. So in thinking about professional development moving forward, whether teaching fully online or hybrid, providing learning communities for students through the LMS so they can engage regularly on their own time would be a wonderful addition to any professional development. To be sure to offer in-person and online office hours, like I just said, or if meeting with students online, just flip the camera on if you would want to, and just be real with them. Let them be able to see you, let them have that communication, that friendly face, let them hear your voice, and also to just be aware, maybe think about rethinking a little bit about the syllabus itself. I know a lot of institutions have put in a really good section on how to find help, for mental health services and those kinds of facilities that are available on institutions. So just to be able to think about that for the professional development as well, I think would be a really key area. So to wrap up, the new normal for higher ed, it will be written long after we're done with all of this and our research has concluded here. But the global pandemic did amplify the need for instructional technology knowledge, especially the learning management system and specific training on how to most effectively teach online. And the results here can inform you about different factors that can influence different kinds of things for professional development and could acquire the technology training needs to support online teaching as well. Instructional technology was and likely always will be a very large investment for institutions. I understand that. And during the time of the study, online enrollments did increase at literally every institution that I personally surveyed. And I know that's been a fluctuation back and forth ever since. And though we can't really fully confirm why it increases and decreases all the time, a lot of the reasons were probably due to the emergency move to remote online learning and global pandemic, and how we can proactively go about training for this in the future so that we are really prepared and hopefully don't have those kind of fluctuations in the future. So as mentioned earlier, the evidence in the study, and its many interactions with that I had with faculty and with students alike, provided a great foundation for the importance of professional development as it related to the usage, the usefulness, and the acceptance of instructional technology practices pertaining to online learning. both the formal and informal data that I did collected provide insights for preferences on how and when professional development options could be delivered and areas to focus on for this development and training. And I'm really excited because I know the need for professional development is great and vast, especially for online learning. It's not a new concept, but that level of urgency and proactivity for professional development, I think, was really almost unimaginable a few years ago. And now that it's really the height of a lot of people's thought processes moving forward. A challenge for all of us, I think, will be able to openly embrace change, prepare for the future of online teaching with the use of instructional technology. And I'm hoping that a combination of all these factors that we talked about here today and the information provided to you is resonating with you, is something that maybe you've heard yourself on your own campuses. And I'm really excited to be here with you today and to share these with you as we move forward to the new normal in higher education. So I thank you all very much for your time today. Apologize for any kind of technical difficulties that there were there. If you're interested in looking at any of the references or any of the citations that I do have as part of this study, I would be happy to share those with you at any time. So please feel free to reach out to me. And I thank you very much. Are there any questions or anything else, Dr. Laws?
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. That was a lovely presentation. Yes, we do have a question from Pam. She's wondering what your take is on requiring technology training for online faculty, especially for adjunct faculty, and is requiring training an indicator of institutional rigor, or is it a barrier for online instructors?
Those are great questions, Pam. Thank you for that. So requiring technology training for online faculty, I think it's absolutely vital, in my opinion. And I'm not only going from this research, I'm also going from my own personal experience, professional experience in the past. It's difficult because, again, it's the idea that when it's forced upon anybody, right, it becomes I don't know, almost combative, right? So I know with the institution where I was a director and oversaw distance learning, it was a requirement. You had to either show, now one thing that we did do is you either had to show progress of use. So think about, I'm kind of comparing this to the idea of competency-based learning. So if they could be competent and showcase to us that they had the skills available to teach online, they got a pass. They were able to pass the quiz, if you will, and be able to teach online. And if they didn't have that, they would have to go through our specific training, which was extensive. It was about, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks. And they would have to go through that. So that is certainly something that we did push for. And I think it's very important. And I think it's also important for adjunct faculty. A lot of the students reference that in their conversations. They would say to me, I don't know if they taught full-time or not. I don't think they did because I know they were such and such a title, somewhere else. So they kind of would understand that this wasn't their full-time job, but they also understood that because it wasn't their full-time job, they really lacked the tech savvy of the learning management system to really support their teaching. So a lot of students really, they honed in on that and they understood it. And as much as they love the experience of that adjunct faculty member's professional life outside of the university that they could share with them, it was a struggle for them because it was hard to convey their information. So I think it's important for both. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
Thank you so much. And actually, if our participants, if you're willing to share in chat, please let us know, does your institution provide online online teaching training to adjunct faculty, or is that online teaching training reserved for full-time residential faculty?
Mm-hmm.
So while that's coming in, Dr. Clark, can I bother you to share your contact information slide? And
yeah.
Let's see.
I have it on one of my slides.
Laura's asking if we could email the references and presentation.
Yeah,
yes, we could do that. We can also, we will also post the slides on the National Distance Learning Week website. We just posted a link in chat for that. Glenn is saying, I need and appreciate technical training. Thank you very much. Dr. Holden is saying, can you recommend any SIMs for fully online healthcare administration students?
Oh boy. Not off the top. I'm trying to find my contact information. I apologize. I don't think it's on here, is it? Sorry. Sims for
This
Health.
is this is
that
a
is
good
not-
slide. We could just
Okay. I wish I could just, can I type on here?
we could also put it in chat, or if it's your anthology email, I can.
Anthology is fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
I don't know any offhand. Healthcare is not, I've worked with a number of institutions that deal specifically with healthcare, but I could do a little bit of research there and get back to you, but I don't have an answer off the top of my head right now. I'm sorry. If anybody else does, though, please feel free to chime in.
And Dr. Holden, if you'd like to email Dr. Clark, that way you can stay in touch about those SIMs for fully online healthcare administration
Absolutely.
students. Laura extends her thanks. And then Pam shared that her institution requires training prior to being hired as an adjunct.
I love that.
Brianna as well. Yeah.
I love that.
Wonderful.
I love that. I know it's not popular, I mean, nobody wants to take the time to go through training when it's an extension of your full-time job already. But the benefits that will come back, I think, come back tenfold when it comes to that engagement part. I preach about engagement all the time. If you've ever heard me before or read anything I've written in the past, I'm all about student engagement. And again, I think it goes three ways. It's student to student, student to instructor, and student to actual content. I was an instructor of visual communications. I'm big on visuals. And it's the idea too, if you go that route and if you encourage that activity with the content, you really have to think also about accessibility too, right? So there's a whole other realm for professional development opportunity there also. And if I am going to make an audio recording, if I am going to put a video out there for my students, then what do I do to make sure it is all inclusive for all of my students? What do I do to make sure there's a transcript available? I, as many of you, I'm sure, have gone and literally typed in my own transcript if I've had to make sure that all of my students have that experience. And ultimately, the goal is to have as much of an in-person classroom experience as possible in the online environment for our students. That's what our goal is, right? So anytime I'm doing in my current job with product development, I am thinking constantly, if I am teaching in person, how can I take that experience and I can do it now in my online environment? What is it that I can do to make that easier? And I think if we can keep thinking that way, I think it really does help move us forward into a really positive environment. So
yeah, absolutely. And speaking of accessibility, short of typing our own transcript, which is very time consuming.
Very tedious, yes.
There's
tricks.
YouTube automatically close captions and then allows you to touch up those auto close captions. So you can put capitalization and punctuation and kind of tweak those more technical terms.
Absolutely. I've done that many times.
Yeah.
many times.
Speaking of this more technical side, we have a question about what technical training would you recommend for faculty?
I would start with your learning management system, but it was really interesting to me because ironically, something as simple as taking a Word document and creating it as a PDF was foreign to some people. The ability to take an image and not make it ginormous. What are the easy ways to do that for an instructor who's maybe a novice with technology? A lot of the times lately, and we just had a conversation about this the other day, actually, in one of my meetings, when you take a picture, let's picture my grandkids right there. You take a picture and you want to just upload it to your course. Well, that picture that you just took is gigantic when it comes to pixel size and dimensions. So it's going to take up a lot of room in your LMS and on your storage. What are some of the things that you could do very quickly and even through just a basic editor to minimize that? So those are kinds of the the other technical things that I don't think are thought about a lot when it comes to professional development. So I would think about those kinds of things. But certainly you want to start with your LMS, of course, and how you can best utilize that. And make it as easy as possible. You know, the ones that are the super users of any learning management system, they will have an algorithm for their calculations of their grades that are, you know, as long as my arm, right? Because they've been doing this, they understand it, they know what they're doing, but not everybody has to do that. So try to make some of those things easier so that they can focus a lot on the content itself and how to create a really great engaged course for their students. And I think they're going to find great success that way.
Yeah, absolutely. To our earlier question of whether the institutions represented in the room today are providing training to adjuncts, Sam mentioned that at their institution, there's no required training, but they're working on that. So to take that one step further, Dr. Clark, where would you say an institution considering to create training for adjunct learners could begin? So we mentioned a little bit of LMS training is critical. What else, you know, what other ingredients would be helpful to keep in mind for an institution just looking to launch a training program?
I'm also a big fan. I took an approach one time of creating a toolbox. So you know, you could call it whatever you want, the online learning toolbox or whatever it is, but putting in, whether it's on a slide deck or however you would want to do it, I would do a video walkthrough, probably share your screen, walk through the video of you actually utilizing some of the tools, but let them know what tools actually exist for their use. You know, things like Microsoft, even if you're a Microsoft house, you know, or if you're a Google house, whatever it is that you utilize to create documents or to create engaged media for your students, let them know that those exist and that they're out there. What is it inside the LMS that's available to them? You know, I'm just going to speak from my own experiences, but things like an internal messaging system for the LMS or an email system, which one of those are preferred? And what do you find best success with your students? How do you create a really good discussion board that makes sense and it is engaging and isn't so boring for students, right? So those kinds of things I think are super important. So the toolbox, if you will, on what they could start with and what they could utilize to build out their engagement.
That's very useful and a very clever thing to do. Just look at the technology that the institution has and then present it to faculty and provide training and support for it.
Yeah, there's a good analogy I just heard, actually. It was about building a sandwich. So it's like when you go to the fridge and you want to build a sandwich for yourself, think about all the things you take out to build your sandwich. Well, if I want to make a really good course, what are all the components I need to make a really good course? And you get it all out there and put it in your toolbox. And that's how you can think about that. Make it less stressful, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. We're at the top of the hour, I know. So.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. If you have any more questions or think of anything else where you would like to, you know, to discuss, to cross-pollinate ideas, please don't hesitate to reach out to Dr. Clark at lisa.clark@anthology.com. We will have the slides uploaded hopefully later today, definitely by Monday. We're very grateful to you for spending this hour with us and hope to see you again next Friday. Valerie, actually, if I could give you the floor, if you'd like to offer a little preface for next Friday. But otherwise, thanks everyone. And most importantly, Dr. Clark, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Oh, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
I wanted to say a huge thank you as well. So thank you, Gio. Next Friday we're taking a Friday off. But stay tuned to your newsletter emails and, you know, checking out the website again. Please start to consider putting in those proposals we'd love to hear what your learning is. I know there's always wisdom in the chat, and I'd love to see that wisdom get put into a session that we can share with others. So if you're interested in speaking or you're interested in speaking at one of these Friday sessions, let me know that. I'm always happy to talk to people about making that happen as well. But most of all, just have a wonderful, happy, healthy, safe weekend. and we will see you back here for a future webinar. But thank you
Thank
all
you,
again so much for
everybody.
coming. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Let me end the recording and then
Thank you.